So with that, we'll call panel 2 to the witness table, and the second panel is composed of Majed Shafi and Amjad Khan. And I don't know if one of you has a preference of going first. I'll let you decide whomever would go first. Mr. Khan.
Thank you very much, Representative Pitts. It's an honor to be here. I want to first begin by thanking the Commission for holding this very important hearing, and also to commend you for your leadership on this issue. I have a longer version, a written submission, and I asked the permission of the Commission to submit the full extent of my remarks into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
The Ahmadiyya Muslim community is arguably the most persecuted Muslim community in the world. The U.S. State Department, the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, and dozens of reputable and prominent human rights NGOs have documented the systematic persecution endured by the community at the hands of religious extremists and state institutions. Over the past several decades, hundreds of Ahmadi Muslims have been murdered in Pakistan, and dozens more in Bangladesh and in Indonesia. In 2010 alone, 99 Ahmadi Muslims were murdered in Pakistan. That was the deadliest year ever for the community in over 120 years. The persecution of the community, Representative Pitts, is pervasive and cuts very deep. What I wanted to do is first begin by providing just a very short overview of the community that may help explain why it continues to be a prime target of extremists who purport to represent Islam. The Ahmadis belong to a contemporary Islamic revival movement that was founded in 1889 by Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, who was born in a small village of Qadian in India. The fundamental difference between the Ahmadiyya Muslim community and the Sunni Muslim majority concerns the identity of the Messiah. This is the reformer that the Prophet Muhammad predicted would appear after him and who all Muslims await. The Ahmadi Muslims believe that Mirza Ghulam Ahmad is that messianic figure, is that Messiah. And his chief aim and purpose was to revive Islam by ending religious wars, condemning bloodshed, and reinstituting morality, justice, and peace. The community claims a worldwide membership exceeding tens of millions in over 195 countries, with the largest concentrations in South Asia and West Africa. And the headquarters are in the United Kingdom, where its international leader, His Holiness Mirza Masroor Ahmad, currently resides. So with that very brief background, let me now first turn to Pakistan to discuss the deteriorating conditions for the community. For 6 decades, the community has endured wide-ranging abuses in Pakistan. On May 28, 2010, the community watched in horror as armed gunmen from the Pakistani Taliban, the TTP, which is a group designated by the State Department to be a major terrorist organization, attacked hundreds of Ahmadi Muslim worshippers who were gathered for Friday prayers at 2 mosques in model town Lahore. When the dust had cleared, 86 Ahmadis were dead. This was the largest single attack against the community ever, and one of the deadliest terrorist attacks in Pakistan's history. There are an estimated 3 or 4 million Ahmadi Muslims currently living in Pakistan. Ahmadi Muslims profess to be Muslims, but their belief is irrelevant under the law. And that is because that Pakistan is the only Islamic state in the world to define who is or is not a Muslim for purposes of its constitution. This is Article 260. And significantly, the Second Amendment to Pakistan's constitution, which was passed in 1974, explicitly deprives members of the Ahmadiyya community of their right to self-identify as Muslims. Since that amendment in 1974, over 300 Ahmadis have been killed. As has been well chronicled by the international community, since 1984, Pakistan uses its criminal code to prohibit and punish blasphemy. And Chairman Leo mentioned this in his remarks. Blasphemy in Pakistan broadly refers to any spoken or written representation that, quote, directly or indirectly outrages the religious sentiments of Muslims. So 5 of Pakistan's current penal code provisions punish blasphemy, and these are collectively referred to as the anti-blasphemy laws. In 28 years, more than 1,000 people have been arrested under these laws, and these individuals, they represent a broad spectrum of Muslims, be they Sunni, Shia, or Ahmadi, Christians, and Hindus. And their crimes are wide-ranging and quite trivial. Their punishments range from fines to indefinite detention to life imprisonment to capital punishment. No one to date has been executed in Pakistan under the blasphemy laws, but at least 32 individuals have been killed by mobs after they had been arrested for blasphemy. And the most notorious of these 5 laws is a 50-word law, Section 295C, which is a very broad and vague statute. It says that whoever by words, either spoken or written, or by visible representation, or by any imputation, innuendo, or insinuation, directly or indirectly defiles the sacred name of the Prophet Muhammad shall be punished with death, life imprisonment, and shall also be liable to a fine. These are the 50 words of that statute. Based on that remarkably broad language, virtually anyone can register a blasphemy case against anyone else in Pakistan, and the accused can face capital punishment. For Ahmadis, these laws have essentially criminalized their very existence. Now, 2 of these 5 laws actually explicitly target the activities of Ahmadis. These are called Ordinance 20. And for fear of being charged as indirectly or directly posing as a Muslim, Ahmadi Muslims can't profess their faith either verbally or in writing. In light of this, Pakistani police have destroyed Ahmadi translations of the Quran, banned Ahmadi publications, the use of any Islamic terminology on wedding invitation cards, on tombstones, the displaying of the Islamic creed, the kalima on mosques. Police have actually taken that down forcibly. So basically, any public act of worship, devotion, or propagation by an Ahmadi is treated as a criminal offense, punishable by fine, imprisonment, or death. And over 40% of all arrests are of Ahmadi Muslims, and the situation grows dire each passing year. There's an example that I wanted to state for the record. In 2009, there were 4 Ahmadi school teenagers in the Laya district. They were charged with blasphemy for allegedly writing the name of Muhammad on the walls of a mosque's toilet. These were purely fabricated charges. The BBC documented them. They served 6 months in prison, and they continue to face blasphemy charges, the threat of blasphemy. And it's cases like these that are not uncommon. In prior years, elderly Ahmadi women, Ahmadi mothers, Ahmadi infants have fallen victims to these laws. It spares nobody. And the persecution of the community goes beyond the blasphemy laws. Owing to pressure from religious extremists, Pakistani authorities have demolished, set on fire, forcibly occupied, sealed, or barred the construction of over 90 mosques belonging to the Ahmadi community. I should note that an Ahmadi can't refer to their mosque as a mosque. That too is an arrestable offense. After the Lahore attacks, there was a press conference because it was such a major attack, and while there, the spokesperson for the Ahmadi community said, the 2 mosques that were attacked, I cannot, for the record, say they're mosques without you arresting me. So that it's a very tragic situation. Even the cemetery burial of Ahmadi Muslims is denied. Bodies are exhumed because they're the wrong kind of Muslims. And significantly, the state security, and this is important because it's not just religious extremists, it's state institutions that facilitate this. The police knew about the attacks that were to happen on the Ahmadi community by the Pakistani Taliban. The chairperson for the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, Asma Jahangir, sent letters to the authorities saying these attacks are imminent, and yet they took no action, and in the end, 86 people were dead. Now, over the past year, Representative Pitts, the situation has gone from bad to worse. In June of 2011, the All Pakistan Students Khatm-e-Nabuwat Federation distributed shocking anti-Ahmadi pamphlets in Faisalabad, which is one of Pakistan's largest cities. The pamphlets encouraged the outright assassination of a select group of Ahmadis by name. Their names were listed, their addresses were listed. And the letter said that they are wajibul qatl, which means worthy of being killed. When the Ahmadi leaders approached the police and said, this hit list, which has a name and phone number of the people who are perpetrating it, should be investigated, there was no attention. There was no investigation. And as a result, right now, thousands of Ahmadis in Faisalabad live in fear. And just a few weeks ago, there was an assassination attempt on the president of our community in Faisalabad. He barely survived, but 2 people with him were severely injured. And then earlier this year, 5,000 people held a rally in Rawalpindi, and this was this included extremists and representatives from trade unions. They gathered outside an Ahmadi Muslim mosque, and they called for the demolition of the mosque, and they said Ahmadis were wajibul qatl. And again, the police have failed to take action. And I want to conclude with my description of Pakistan by highlighting 2 critical issues for this commission. These 2 issues uniquely affect the Ahmadi community. The blasphemy laws, as you know, affect a wide group, but these 2 issues affect the Ahmadis in particular. The first issue concerns the right to vote in Pakistan. From 1978 to 2002, Pakistan employed a separate electorate system that put non-Muslims and Ahmadi Muslims on separate voting lists, and that was abolished by President Musharraf on February 27, 2002. It was an executive order he passed, Executive Order 7. This was a great step. The international community said this is terrific. We now have one person, one vote in Pakistan. But in a remarkable move, 4 months later, he passed Executive Order 15, which said that that original order restoring the joint electorate did not apply to the Ahmadis. They were excluded from the joint electorate. The only way an Ahmadi can vote in Pakistan is if he or she declares himself to be a non-Muslim, declares the founder of our community to be an imposter, and adds their name to a supplemental list. Now, of course, no Ahmadi Muslim should or would ever agree to these patently discriminatory conditions. So as a result, Ahmadis are the only religious group in Pakistan today to be excluded from the joint electorate, and this has persisted for over 10 years. The disenfranchisement of Ahmadi Muslims adversely impacts all Pakistanis because Ahmadis have a remarkable literacy rate. They're among Pakistan's most educated citizenry. So it's a huge block of 3 million people who can't vote. And the second issue concerns the Pakistan citizenship forms. The first is the passport form. So for all Pakistanis, if you want to renew your passport, you have to fill out a form. Every Pakistani, in order to get a passport, has to denounce Ahmadi Muslim beliefs and declare the founder of our community to be an imposter. Every Pakistani, in order to get your passport renewed. In other words, the government of Pakistan forces all Pakistani Muslims seeking passports to swear under penalty of perjury their explicit opposition to our community. And recently, earlier this month, the National Database and Registration Authority of Pakistan instituted a new national ID card, and they have a new category called Qadiani, which is a derogatory term for our community. So if you're an Ahmadi, you have to register as a Qadiani, not a Muslim, not a non-Muslim, as a Qadiani, a separate politically charged term just to get a national ID card. So those 2 issues in particular, Representative Pitts, are issues that I think the United States can do something about. The restoration of citizenship rights is something that's less politically charged than the blasphemy laws, and it's by a stroke of a pen, the Executive Order 15 can be repealed. I'm short of time, and I just briefly wanted to highlight 2 incidences in India and Bangladesh and conclude my testimony. Ahmadis are being targeted all over India. The headquarters of the Ahmadi community, it was founded in India in 1889. There are millions of Ahmadis who are spread across India. It's fared much better than Pakistan, but there's an increasing chorus of radical voices demanding that Ahmadi Muslims be declared non-Muslim following Pakistan's example. There are demands that Ahmadis can't do the Hajj, their books are banned. There's efforts to stop their conventions. Recently, In New Delhi, the local police prevented Ahmadi Muslims from holding a Quran exhibit. And in Andhra Pradesh, they've classified Ahmadis as non-Muslims and said that their mosques should be not deemed as such. So this is spreading in India. And in Bangladesh, there are roughly 100,000 Ahmadi Muslims there. There's been a storied history of persecution of the community for many years. In 2001 up until 2006, the government banned the books, Ahmadi books and publications. It's improved markedly since 2006, but the State Department recent report notes that it's getting worse, and local authorities in the Ghazipur district, also in Tangail, have cracked down heavily on Ahmadis, and there's been a smattering of attacks against Ahmadis in Bangladesh. So right now I've only provided a brief sketch of the persecution just in South Asia. But the persecution of the Ahmadi community is worldwide. In the Middle East, in Egypt, in UAE, in Egypt, 10 of our Ahmadi Muslims, the central leadership, were all arrested under the Article 98F blasphemy law. This was under Hosni Mubarak's regime. In UAE, there's laws against us. In Palestine, in Kazakhstan, in the Kyrgyz Republic, in Indonesia, 27 provinces have banned the Ahmadi community. There's a growing, I briefed this commission last year about Indonesia in particular. So really the source of all of this are religious extremists who espouse a militant perversion of Islam. And our community, it's in our DNA to oppose such extremism. That's what our founder preached. And we strongly believe that that must be cut at its root. We welcome all the efforts of this commission and appreciate the opportunity here to testify. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khan. Mr. Shafee? The green light.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I would like to thank you, and I would like to thank as well the staffers, Ms. Khalida, for all her hard work. Before I start, I would like to acknowledge the presence of two of my dear friends. One of them is Mr. John Weston, member of the Canadian Parliament, who accompanied me to Pakistan. Mr. John, if you can just stop. Thank you. Stand up. Thank you. Mr. as well, Myro Silva, the Canadian and International Director for the Holocaust Study and Research Task Force, and he's also accompanied me to Afghanistan when I went there in my fact-finding mission.
Yeah, he stood.
Today I will be speaking about two subjects, or two countries, which will be Afghanistan and Pakistan. We've been in the region. One Free World International have basically 28 branches around the world. A lot of our branches is basically underground investigation branches, or intelligence collecting fact-finding missions. Between Pakistan and Afghanistan, I visited the country at least 7 or 8 times, and we have a strong team on the ground to help the people, but at the same time to get us some facts on the ground. In Pakistan, I will discuss 3 issues. The first one will be the blasphemy law, the 295C and 295B, and I'm sure that already been talked about this many times, especially Minister Shahbaz Bhatti, and less than 2 months before that was Salim Taseer, the governor of Punjab. But also, the blasphemy law been used just for personal disputes on the neck on the minority, the Christians or the Ahmadiyyas or whoever they are. Right now, as we're talking, like we have Ashia Noreen, known as Ashia Bibi, sorry, or Jadish Kumran, which is a Hindu factor, a Hindu worker in the shoes factory that basically was killed because this blasphemy law. We have also Dr. Robin Sandar, which was beaten and was tortured severely in 6 months in the Pakistani prison. But the main incident here that took my attention was actually July 2009. Gujra village. It was basically a village, a Christian village, around 3,000 of them. And there was a Christian wedding. Somebody accused that this village was basically insulting the Quran or insulting Muhammad. And the following day, 10,000 Muslim extremists attacked the village from other 4 villages surrounding this village. And 14 people was killed. 9 of them was burned alive. And basically, we was there in the village, and this is the picture of the attack that happened in the village at this time. The second subject will be the hudud law in Pakistan. The hudud law in Pakistan, basically, if a woman gets raped, must have 4 male witnesses, or she will receive the zina. The zina is adultery charge, which is mean that she will receive 100 lashes, or she will be in prison for life. So by this law, if a woman gets raped, must have 4 male witnesses that she got raped. I have a question. If there is a 4 male witnesses standing around, why they didn't help her or save her? So the law is basically useless. Now, the amendment of this law in 2006 that they made it under the criminal code, but this is just, they changed the law, but they never enforced the law. Now, here's the problem with the rape of the Christian girls or even rape in general. Now, our resources indicate that there is at least 300 cases per week rape in Pakistan, Muslims or Christians or whoever they are. But here is the problem. When rape been used as a hate crime, now rape itself is of course an evil crime, but as well as used as a hate crime, such as Neha Munir. If you read the report, Neha Munir, she's 2.5 years old. She was raped because her father refused to convert from Christianity to Islam. So her father was a farmer. The owner of the farm asked from him to convert to Islam. He refused. He kidnapped the little child, Neha Munir. He raped her severely. And for the 4 years, there was no justice, there was no court. We had to help this family. And now we cooperated with the Federal Minister of Immigration of Canada, Minister Jason Kenney, which is a hero in human rights. And we was able to save the little girl from Pakistan to Canada. Right now, they live in Canada safe and sound. The last issue in Pakistan that I would like to raise would be the slave camps. The slave camps, this is the bricks factory in Pakistan. Basically, the bricks factory is that they go to the minorities and they tell them, well, you are poor and we'll give you a job, we'll give you a loan, and come work in this bricks factory. In this bricks factory, once they get in, of course, they don't have money, they are unable to pay back the loan, and they work as a slave, they work day and night. I met with 5-year-old children that have been working basically because they become slaves as a minority. Some of them is as well from the Ahmadiyya community. The 2 ways to get out of this slave factory in Pakistan is basically by converting to Islam or by selling your kidney. And we met with victims and we succeed to pinpoint 660 family that are in slavery right now in Pakistan, and this is just underestimation. We're still working on more names and more investigation with this regard.
Pardon me, did you say selling their kidneys?
Or selling their kidneys, yes, sir. This is the only way to get out of the slave factory, of the slave camps in Pakistan. Now, if we are talking about Afghanistan, also in Afghanistan, I will discuss basically 3 subjects. Number 1 is women's rights. To start with women's rights in Afghanistan there is already a lot of women's rights problems such as forced marriages, exchange marriages, underage marriages. But Hamid Karzai, the president of Afghanistan, even made it worse. In July 27, 2009, he made the Shia personal status law, which is basically by this law, every wife have to have sex with her husband every 4 days, or he have the right to starve her, not to give her any food or to give her any material that sustain her life. She have to have sex with him every 4 days, or she will not be able to eat. He have the right to starve her. This is the law in Afghanistan. Now, here's the problem. As well, he did the blood money, which is basically they allow that if a woman get raped, the man that raped her, he have the right to just basically pay her. It's called blood money, and without get charged for his crime. But just a few days ago, the Ulama Council restriction of women, of the status of women, the Ulama consultation is basically a government-funded organization that basically they are the head of the Muslim community in Afghanistan. 2 days before the International Women's Day, they made more restriction on women's rights. They cannot leave their home without their husbands. They cannot travel. They don't, in the schools, in the work, they are second-class citizens. That's basically what Hamid Karzai just did a few days ago, to be exact, March 6th of this year, 2 days before the International Women's Day. We go from here to the, which is, of course, this is the contract of the Convention on the Elimination of All Form of Discrimination Against Women that Afghanistan actually signed on it. Go from there to Bashabazi, or boy play. Boy play in Afghanistan is basically when you bring a small little child and you make him wear like a little girl, and you make him dance in a party. And after they dance in the party, there is this group of men, they start raping them. That's happening in Afghanistan today. Such as Farho, 16 years old, who get raped from 8 to 10 times a day. Such as Mukhtar, age of 16, he and his brother get raped in the refugee camp. When he ran to the Afghani police and complained to the Afghani police basically give him back to the people who was raping him. And such as Zakdishi, which he was raped as a child. He's 15 years old. This is what's happening in Afghanistan today. Coming to the last part, which is the freedom of religion in Afghanistan. In May 27-28, 2010, there was a television news show in Afghanistan, and it was basically a group of Christians that are getting baptized and converting from Islam to Christianity, most of them from the Hazaras community or from the Hazara tribe, which the Hazara tribe is basically the Shia in Afghanistan, and they look Asian, so it's very easy to pinpoint them. Mr. Attar Kawasi, a respected member of the Afghani parliament, the deputy secretary in the lower house said, and I quote, this is a respected member in the Afghani parliament in front of the Afghani national TV. He said, those Afghans that appeared in this film should be executed in public. The House should order the Attorney General and the NDS is the Afghani Intelligence Security System, to arrest these Afghans and execute them. That's basically, he said this in the Afghani national TV. Hamid Karzai immediately allow his interior minister and the head of intelligence to arrest these people. Mr. Chairman, in my hand here, and I'm willing to give you a copy if you wish and if you desire, a secret Afghani document by the Afghani government, basically to arrest Muslims converted to Christianity, and they pinpoint their names: Ali Walid Rida, Salim Walad Muhammad Nasim, Shukrullah Walad Nadir Ali, Rahmatullah Walad Karim Bikhsh, Ali Mizradi Walad Hassan Shah, signed by the Afghani government to arrest and to kill these people immediately. And this is signed by the Afghani government. By the way, a copy of this was given to the Canadian Human Rights Subcommittee and was translated and was investigated at it. And a copy of this, when we went to Afghanistan, we confronted the Afghani government with it, and they couldn't even answer us. This document, and I'm willing to give you a copy of it.
We would like to receive, the Commission would like to receive
Absolutely. That. Absolutely, thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, if you allow me, I will not read from these papers anymore. Allow me to speak basically from my heart just for the next minute or two. I was persecuted Christian myself back home in Egypt. I was tortured. I was I was in the Egyptian prison for 7 days. Until now, when I take my jacket off, I see my scars on my body. They used to put salt and lemon in my open wounds in the Egyptian prison. My defense on these people is not because I'm the head of One Free World International or another NGO or another guy wearing a suit sitting behind a desk. I used to be one of them. I know the persecution that they are facing. Mr. Chairman, this Afghanis, the converted from Islam to Christianity, now we're not talking about debate of religion. It's not a matter of which religion better than other. It's a matter of freedom of religion. Which religion that you want to convert, or if you don't want to believe in anything at all. Our American troops, and if I can point as well, our Canadian troops died for the freedom of this land, died for the freedom in this land. And yet there is human rights abuses, and the American government and the Canadian government is not doing enough to confront Hamid Karzai, the president of Afghanistan. We're saying that Afghanistan and Pakistan is alliance to United States. Pakistan, alliance to the United States, they're hiding Osama bin Laden for many years beside the biggest army military base. And they said, well, we didn't know about it. Well, it's one of the two. Or you are not doing your job properly, or you are a traitor. It's one of the two. There is no third option. Hamid Karzai and the Pakistani government is not a friend of the United States, is not a friend of Canada or the West in general. So what's the solution, Reverend Shafir? Like, okay, we pinpoint the problems, what we do now. Now, the cost of the war in Afghanistan, over $5 billion. This year, United States will give them extra more as aid, extra more $3 billion. International trade, over $5 billion. The same thing with Afghanistan. Now, you tell me, Chairman, why are we still giving aid? Why are we still having this international trade to people that they are killing our own people, their own citizen? And the question remains, why we don't connect our international trade and our aid to the improvement of human rights in these countries? This is an extremely important part. In the end, Mr. Chair, I just want to close by that, by thanking you, by thanking my colleagues from Canada, all the members of parliament that came from Canada. And in the end, I would like to say that the persecuted Christians is dying, but they're still smiling. They are in very deep, dark night, but they still have the candle of the living God. In the end, I would like to say that they can always kill the dreamer, but no one can kill the dream. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate your time.
Chair thanks the gentleman, thank the witnesses for your compelling testimony, and we will now begin questioning. We've been joined by our co-chair of the commission, Mr. McGovern. I'll begin the questioning to Mr. Khan. Pakistan's openly discriminatory anti-Ahmadi laws remain in place, as you've said, and clearly violate international standards for religious freedom. In your opinion, what is the outlook for changes in the relevant laws, and what can the United States government do to encourage the Pakistani government to reform those laws?
Thank you, Representative Pitts. That's a very important question. So a two-part answer. With respect to the outlook of constitutionality or challenges to the anti-blasphemy laws in Pakistan, the outlook is very bleak for several reasons. First and foremost, the laws were challenged formally before the Pakistan Supreme Court in a case Zahiruddin versus State in 1993, and the Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of those laws. It was also challenged in federal Shariat court, the highest religious court, and again in 1988, and those laws were upheld. So in terms of legal recourse within Pakistan, the outlook is very bleak. There possibly could be renewed challenges, but in the face of Zahiruddin, it's storied precedent. As with politically within Pakistan, the issue is tenuous. Those voices who were most courageous in trying to reform the blasphemy laws were silenced. We know about Governor Taseer, and we know about Minister Shahbaz Bhatti, both of whom pushed very hard for reforms. There's marginal reforms that are in play. For example, the first information report, which is the criminal document that is brought for these blasphemy charges. There was some reform to make it, to punish frivolous claims, but that has died. in government and in discussion, and there's no real reform on the table as yet. But we're hopeful that possibly could change. However, internationally, the story is different. The most important human rights covenant in the world, the ICCPR, to which Pakistan is the signatory and in 2010 ratified, Articles 18, 19, 20, and 27 very much protect religious freedom, the right to change your faith, freedom of conscience. In the face of those provisions, the anti-blasphemy laws cannot survive, and very significantly, reservations as to the ICCPR, which Pakistan had in place, which basically said if there's a law and order justification, if there's a reason to have these anti-blasphemy laws, we can have them, have been withdrawn by Pakistan. So now, in the Universal Periodic Review, Pakistan is up for that review next month. A major question before the international audience is how can Pakistan's blasphemy laws survive in light of the withdrawal of the reservations from the ICCPR ratification. So I'm optimistic that that issue has to be answered in the international community, and Pakistan should be held accountable for that. And it follows thereafter that indeed the laws should be repealed to abide by international human rights commitments.
And what can the international community do?
So the international community, I think first and foremost, the Universal Periodic Review, which is next month, NGOs and those who are interested parties and, of course, member states have an open questioning of Pakistan's commitment every 4 years. So in the past 4 years, since 2008, what has Pakistan done to improve and reform the blasphemy laws? That was posed to them in 2008. Now, in light of the ratification, withdrawal of reservations, those questions are very critical. That debate is very critical, and Pakistan should be answerable to that. So I do believe that the international community, including the United States, has a major role to play in that regard.
Thank you. Mr. Shafee, what, if any, is the outlook for further reform of Pakistan's Hudud Ordinance? And what can the United States do to further encourage the Pakistani government to reform these laws?
Well, I think to start with, the recent Pakistani government need to be confronted on all their failure, because the recent Pakistani government, I believe that they are trying to compromise and they are trying to open dialogue with the extremist groups. And by all means, I think by supporting the law and justice there, support the democratic process there, even our aid, when we give aid, we don't monitor where is this aid went. We don't monitor where it gone for. Like when I went to Pakistan and I met with with Pakistani authority, I asked them, Canada give them this amount of aid. Where does this aid go? They don't know. They didn't answer me. They said, well, we don't know where is this aid went. Connecting the aid and the international trade to the improvement of human rights and to improve the democracy there is extremely important. Or that's basically we're giving the aid and we're giving the money to our governments can use and abuse this money and can use it against us. And this has happened before in the history, Mr. Chairman. So 2 things I will advise. As I said before, connecting the aid and the international trade to the improvement of human rights, but as well, when we give the aid and we give the international trade, we have to have accountability. Where is the go? That is go to the education, that it go to the support women rights, different NGOs on the ground to make a difference. Like this year in the 2012, United States pledged over $3 billion aid to Afghanistan. Less than 8% is going for human rights in Afghanistan. That's on the State Department website. That's not my information. Less than 8% is going there. To the human rights. And I think that this is a big mistake, and I think that's what we need to change. The solution starts by us.
You spoke very eloquently on the horrific situation in Afghanistan, particularly the status for women. And it seems like that the Afghan government is sometimes sensitive to international pressure and criticism, given the outcome of the 2 recent high-profile cases of apostasy. In your opinion, how will these such cases be resolved after the 2014 security transition, when the international community will presumably have less influence on Afghanistan. And what is the appropriate role for the international community in intervening in specific cases on like these in Afghanistan?
Well, I think even before we leave, we need to take a close look at the leadership of Hamid Karzai himself. Like when I was in Afghanistan, I met with his security chief, and I met with many of his government officials, include foreign affairs, include education. And we met as well with the opposition, which is Dr. Abdullah. And everybody indicate to me that this man is not a good friend. He's not doing a good job, Mr. Chairman. And before we leave Afghanistan, we need really to take a close look at the leadership of Hamid Karzai himself. Because after we leave Afghanistan, it will even get harder. And with my all respect, Mr. Chairman, when we're talking about Afghanistan is very sensitive about international pressure, we send our troops to die there for them. We send our children to die there for them. What's sensitive? Like, I mean, if they are sensitive, good for them. Maybe they can take Advil or aspirin or something. But like when we send like let's say around 2,000 American soldiers died in Afghanistan, and more than 15,000 came back injured from Afghanistan. On the Canadian side, 158 Canadian soldiers died, and more than 2,000 was injured. These are the blood of our children. And I will not talk to you about the cost of the war, the over $500 billion that we spend in Afghanistan. But I think we have the right to come and say, this will not work. We have the right. In the last election in Afghanistan, there was the NATO indicate that the results of the election was not clear and was not clean. I don't know why the international society did not interfere at this point. So the question here is the accountability of the Afghani government before we leave Afghanistan. Is very important that we do. It's very important that before we leave Afghanistan, that we have a confrontation with the Afghani president, and if he like it or he don't like it, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. We are partners. We paid a very heavy price in Afghanistan, and I think it's about time that we stand up for what we paid for.
Thank you. Just one final, Mr. Khan, on the Ahmadis. You mentioned a hit list in Faisalabad, police failing to take action. Has our State Department engaged on this at all? Have you notified the State Department?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. We've actually briefed the State Department every month on these issues. On that particular issue, which was the hit list, that was raised. The actual list itself, a copy of it, was also submitted. Whether there's been follow-up or investigation on the ground, I'm not aware of. But certainly has been raised at the highest levels. There's indication that several of those Ahmadis on that list are being threatened, indeed may have been killed. I mean, in the past 6 months, there's been maybe 6 or 7 Ahmadis who've been killed. I mentioned the assassination attempt on the president of the community in Faisalabad. I would very much recommend that there be an actual answer to the question of whether the police have, in fact, investigated that particular document. The language in that document, which is not just in Faisalabad, it's rampant throughout publications. There's maybe 80 or 90 billboards using the phrase Wajibul Qatl, Ahmadis are worthy of being killed, openly in Lahore. We provided all of that information to the State Department. There's ample evidence, hard evidence, overwhelming evidence that Ahmadis are being targeted for their beliefs. There's even on media airwaves, on the major channel Geo TV, they had a major program in which some of the leaders said that Ahmadis are Wajibul Qatl. A day later, 2 Ahmadis were gunned down. This was a few years ago. So this is permeated not just locally in the provincial level, but also in the federal level, as well as just inaction, acting with impunity, and that I think can be rectified.
And you said there are 3 million in Pakistan?
Yes, the estimates
How many in
vary.
India?
Yeah, there's about the same number in India as well. It's a very large, sizable population, several million in South Asia. And Bangladesh, there's 100,000 as well. So it's a very large concentration of Ahmadis. Many Ahmadis after the Lahore attacks have had to flee Pakistan. In my pro bono practice, I represent many refugees, many of those Ahmadis, hundreds of those Ahmadis. In those cases, the State Department has done an admirable job in helping assist with refugee processing, and PRM has worked very hard on that, particularly Assistant Secretary Schwartz. But the major issues on the ground in Pakistan are very disturbing, and I would again repeat the emphasis should be on the restoration of citizenship rights, particularly the right to vote. Ahmadis have contributed to civil service at the highest levels. The first foreign minister of Pakistan was an Ahmadi. He's also president of the General Assembly of the UN, president of the International Court of Justice, Sir Zafrullah Khan. So there's been many Ahmadis in high government, so it actually behooves the country to empower such a block of voters and allow them to vote freely. And I think that is an executive order that should be repealed.
And finally, Mr. Shafee, I think you mentioned the selling of kidneys. Would you elaborate a little bit? You said 660 cases.
Yeah, families, 660 families that have been
Families have been what?
No, they've been in these slave camps so far, as
Yeah.
far as our investigation goes. So basically, they keep them in these slave camps and in Pakistan to build bricks, to make
Yeah,
bricks.
the brick factories.
At the bricks factories. And basically, they have two ways to escape or to leave out of this, by basically converting to Islam or basically by selling their kidney.
And that's an ongoing practice?
This is ongoing practice, yes, sir. And we have actually, like, we have names, we have addresses, we know who is the people that did this, or at least they asked them to do that.
We'd like to pursue that a little bit more with you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you very much for your
before I
testimony.
close, can I just request
Yeah.
to add my, my written statement to the record, please?
Without objection, so
Thank you,
ordered.
sir.
Chair recognizes the co-chairman of the committee, Mr. Govern.
Well, thank you, and I want to thank Mr. Pitts for helping to organize this hearing today. And I apologize for being late, but I'm doing 3 hearings at once, and so it's difficult to be in 3 places at once. But I recognize that South Asia is one of the most religiously diverse regions of the world, and a region where religious minorities face varying levels of freedom or persecution. And religious extremists are too often tolerated, or even in some cases supported by governments in the region. This hearing is an important opportunity to shed light on the variety of situations and challenges facing religious minorities in South Asia, and to highlight how much remains to be done to ensure that the rights of all religious minorities are protected throughout the region. And I came in at the end of tail end of your testimony, so you may have answered all these. I mean, you may have answered these questions already, and I apologize for that. I appreciate, Mr. El-Shafee, your comments about Afghanistan and the need for us to confront President Karzai. I think we should have confronted him a long time ago on a whole bunch of issues. And I worry very deeply that his government is not only incompetent but corrupt. And it's hard to get incompetent and corrupt governments to do the right thing. And Afghanistan is complicated. And I don't know, quite frankly, how much influence we have. But I do agree that this absolutely should be one of the priorities of our government. And Mr. Khan, Pakistan's openly discriminatory anti-Ahmadi laws remain in place, which they clearly violate international standards for religious freedoms. You may have already answered this, but I'm just curious, what is the outlook for changes in relevant laws? And again, Pakistan's another place where I'm not quite sure how much influence we have. I mean, what is it that we can do to constructively influence these governments? I mean, one of the things I worry sometimes is if we push, then it creates a backlash sometimes. And I want to make sure that when we push, that we're doing it in a way that actually encourages the kind of changes, which we want these governments to take. I think any advice you have would be greatly appreciated.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, those are very important questions. As I mentioned earlier in response to Congressman Pitt's question, there is prospects for reform. There are prospects for reform within Pakistan. With respect to the blasphemy laws, those have been in place for 28 years,
right.
And it's been very difficult to to change that on the ground without consequence. We know that those who are the most vocal opponents of those laws were assassinated. There are changes within Parliament to make it more difficult to bring the first information report, which is the critical key legal document that initiates these cases. And I think that can, marginal incremental reform, perhaps not repealing the laws outright, can actually be done, but it'll take a lot of, frankly, it'll take a lot of effort, both domestically and abroad, to achieve that. I think a more realistic approach would, on the issue of the Ahmadi persecution, is really to push for the restoration of citizenship rights. I mentioned in my testimony the Pakistan passport form. So every Pakistani who needs to renew his passport has to openly declare that our community is a false community and oppose us under penalty of perjury. It is documents like that that can easily be changed. The lack of the right to vote, being excluded from the joint electorate when every other citizen of Pakistan can vote, but Ahmadis cannot vote unless they declare something they're not, as someone who they aren't. I think that is very troubling, and the Executive Order 15 in June of 2002 that achieved that can be repealed. I think the U.S. has an important role in the ongoing dialogue and strategic considerations that they are exploring with Pakistan to raise the issue of restoration of voting rights for Ahmadis. I think that's something that will help the nation, it'll help the country, so I think that is something that can be pushed. It is a very difficult situation, but I do believe that for 6 decades, Ahmadis have been suffering, and that suffering has gone worse and worse each year. And I think that the time has come that beyond soft power, that there should be very high-level discussions around empowering the most moderate groups within Pakistan. Ahmadis are a tiny fraction of the population, maybe 1.5%, but they represent almost 20% of the literate population. So 1 out of every 5 literate Pakistanis is an Ahmadi. That suggests that the Ahmadi community is a community that should be empowered, and it's tragic and sad that they aren't. So I hope that this hearing and in our ongoing briefings with the State Department, we brief the State Department regularly, that we can raise these issues, and I do have hope that it can change, particularly on the citizenship rights perspective side of things.
Well, thank you. That was very helpful. And I appreciate the work that our State Department does, and I appreciate the work of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom and all the investigations that have been conducted by U.S. and international human rights organizations to monitor the issue of religious freedom. This commission, was named the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, so our main focus is human rights. I think too often, when there are high-level discussions between our nation and other nations, human rights doesn't figure as prominently as we would like it to. We get obsessed with, issues of a strategic interest, our economic interest, and all these other kind of things. And I believe that in the long run, that it is important for us to stand up for human rights very clearly, because if not, then we get associated with the people who are perpetrating the human rights. We become the enablers. And so I appreciate both of you being here, and I thank you very much for your testimony.
Chair, thanks, gentlemen. Thanks the witnesses for your testimony. It's very, very helpful. And we'll dismiss